Hello and good morning, everyone. Let's start with today's session of this FDP, the second day of FDP. And in this session, we still have only 31 participants. Okay, let us wait 2-3 minutes, then we can start. More people will join. Okay, I think we can start. People will be joining. So, again, good morning and most welcome to this second day, second session. I will continue with whatever Dr. Tiwari left with. He started with an introduction to deep learning, neural network, the shallow neural network he would have talked about, and he would have talked about the neuron, concept of neuron, what is the concept of neuron activation, neuron firing, then activation functions, what are the weighted sum inputs that goes into the neuron, etc. Okay, so what is the meaning of a neuron, the multi-layer perceptron, etc. In continuation, I will take a very quick view of the introduction that Dr. Tiwari. Okay, so is my screen visible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So I'll just minimize this window and I will. I suppose the font size is also okay and it is visible to all of you. Great. So just a very quick introduction to deep learning and in continuation with whatever Dr. Tiwari discussed. See, deep learning is nothing but an extended, more advanced version of neural network. And the neural network research is nothing new. It has been going on for past 50, 60 years. In this, we have seen many winters. I would say winter, not only in terms of neural network, but also in terms of artificial intelligence. Because if you read the literature, historic literature of artificial intelligence and machine learning, you would come to understand that there are several AI winters that have been discussed. First of all, during 40s and 50s, people started working on artificial intelligence. The term artificial intelligence was given in late 40s. Then after that, everybody thought that okay, we will be able to create machines which will be able to replace human beings, but that didn't happen. Then a winter came towards late 50s. Then again, the concept of expert systems came. Expert systems were systems which were specific to a particular task. They were not something which were very generalized. Okay. So initially people started working. Are there some messages? Okay. So initially people thought that generalized problems, generalized solutions could be created, and these generalized solutions could be implemented for any type of problem. However, that was not the case. Then expert systems were created. Expert systems like you can take an example of air traffic controller systems, then expert systems which are banking management software, then heavy duty database management software. These are expert systems which are created for specific job, specific purposes. Okay, so they were also very good systems. They were able to do lot many things which human was not able to, and better than, much better than humans at that time, even today. Then these systems were not even, people thought that okay, these systems will be able to replace human beings in a certain area, and the application of machines will be much advanced than what it is today. And a lot of money was invested, billions and billions of dollars were invested in expert system. But again, towards 90s, early 90s, the AI winter, again the second AI winter happened, and not many things were done. A lot of technologies, lot of techniques saturated. Much of the research was mostly theoretical. Practical work was not there to be seen. Okay, so in this period of AI winter, the second AI winter that I'm talking about in the 90s, artificial neural network, the ANN, which I'm going to discuss today, also saw its slump, not in terms of the theoretical research, the actual research that was going on, but in terms of application and um, the areas in which it was able to perform very good. It was not able to give very good result. It was not able to give very good time, and lot many problems were there. Most of the things were like vanishing gradient problem were there, and then early saturation problem was there, overfitting problem was there, underfitting problem, a lot of different problems were there. However, the theoretical research was still going on. A lot of scientists, if you take the example of Jan LeCun, who was the pioneer of convolution method, convolutional neural network, if you say, is actually given by Jan LeCun in 90s, towards 97, 96, 97. Then Geoffrey Hinton group from University of Toronto, they were also working, tremendous work they were doing in neural network research. However, all these things were limited to the theoretical research only. The applicability of these things, the research was not that much in picture. Then few things happened towards early years of this century, 2000. One thing was that the vanishing gradient problem, people actually started overcoming this problem, vanishing gradient problem, with certain modifications, certain techniques. So the vanishing gradient problem, which was a very big hurdle in terms of neural network, was in a way overcome. Second problem was that the amount of data that was required for neural network training and research, neural network learning, was not available. Okay. So in this direction, a lot of different research groups, a lot of different projects worked, and they started creating uh, databases, big databases, huge databases, just like the early research worked on MNIST data set, in which you would find handwritten digits. Okay, and these digits these digital images have been taken, they have been converted to grayscale and they have been digitalized. So a digital grayscale images of handwritten digits were stored, were created, and they were labeled. It's 70,000 image data set is there, out of which 60,000 is training and 10,000 is testing. Such a huge data set was created, and kind of this was the starting point with which the creation of newer and bigger data sets in different varying different fields started being created. Okay, so that was another step towards helping the neural network research. Then third, the biggest change that happened in 2000, early 2000, later 2000, or I would say 2006-7, in which NVIDIA came up with their graphical processing unit GPU cards. These graphical processing units were able to separate out the parallel processing graphical execution. Basically, they were created for better graphical visualization, better gaming experiences. But GPUs were able to relieve the CPU, the core computational unit CPU, from the parallel processing problem. Okay, so CPUs were not responsible, although parallel processing was there in CPU, but CPU was responsible for the whole functionality of the computer system, while GPU was dedicated towards specific tasks. And the parallel processing that was promoted by GPUs was so uh, good, it was exceptionally good that neural network researchers started thinking to implement a neural network over GPUs. They started implementing neural networks over GPUs because you see, when you will study, you will understand that all the neurons in a layer are working in parallel. Okay, then in later advanced version of neural network, also you would understand that not only neurons of a single layer, but neurons of different layers, or I should say different various different layers also work in parallel to produce the output. So if these many processing units are working in parallel, why don't we switch it on to GPUs, the whole execution, switch it on to GPUs, utilize the execution processing capability of GPU, and try to see how good is the result. So the neural network hurdle of taking too much time and learning too few parameter was actually overtaken by this parallel processing promoted by GPU cards, which was uh, put up by NVIDIA towards 2006-2007. So when people started working on GPUs, they started utilizing the processing capability of GPU for neural network research. They started getting output in a very short period of time. So suppose all of you are researchers. So if you do an experiment and you have to wait for months to get the output of that experiment, probably by the end of that period, so say you take 3 months, so at the end of 3 months, you would have lost that idea, you would have lost that spark with which you had started working on that experiment. Okay, so that is the biggest hurdle. That was the biggest hurdle with neural network research. People had some idea, they started working, they started training neural network, but neural network would take so much time, months and months on stretch, to give you a single output. So if your output is shown to you after 3 months, 4 months, then you would lose all the charm, all the creativity, and all the motivation to work on these algorithms. And by that time, you would have lost all the idea on how to modify your algorithm if the results are not good. So if the result is good, then also you have lost the motivation. If the result is not good, then you have lost the idea of how these algorithms can be modified so that you get a better algorithm, better result. So when people started working on parallel processors, GPUs, they got their results very soon. Okay, so immediately they would get their results within minutes, within hours. So this idea was not lost. If the algorithm is performing good, then that was exceptional result. And if the algorithm is not performing good, then you had the motivation still with you to change the algorithm, to make some changes in the algorithm, so that make the changes in the algorithm, structure of neural network, and introduce so many different things so that the neural network may perform better. Okay, so these are the things which actually took AI research out of its AI winter, the so-called AI winter, and uh, caused the advent of deep learning research. So the deep learning that we are seeing right now, it's you can say not more than 15 years have passed in which we have been seeing deep learning. In fact, the first paper that came to our knowledge was presented in 2012 by Alex Krzyzewski and Geoffrey Hinton group, in which they presented the AlexNet at ILS-VRC, I suppose, or uh, I think this conference only in Toronto. And there they presented this paper, AlexNet paper, which was one of the first deep learning models which became very famous, okay, for image processing, image classification. So starting from 2012, you see 9 years over here, and 5, 6 years before that. So not even 15 years have passed, and you have seen exceptional results in terms of deep learning, exceptional results in terms of the field in which deep learning can be implemented, and the people, number of people who are working in this field. So all of it is should be contributed to few things like advancement in algorithmic perspective, advancement on the basis of amount of data that we have right now, labeled data, process data, and advancement in terms of computational power, computational ability. So these things contributed to the advent of deep learning. So deep learning is nothing new, just a very advanced version of artificial neural network that we had already. Now, in today's lecture, I have already taken so much time discussing only the historical part. See, I will in this lecture talk about Keras library. Keras works over TensorFlow and Theano. So, Keras was proposed by Francois Cholet in 2017, 2015-17. Is a popular deep learning library with over 250,000 developers at the time, and number of our developer is doubling almost every year. This is built over Google's TensorFlow. Okay, so TensorFlow is a popular open source deep learning library provided by Google. It uses Keras as a high level API for its library. In industry, Keras is used by major technology companies like Google, Netflix, Uber, Nvidia, etc. Keras is a deep learning library that enables us to build and train models efficiently. Okay, so in this lecture, I'll be introducing Keras to you very briefly, and then I will give you a hands-on example probably in next lecture at 3 o'clock, in which I will create a lot of different models through Keras and then execute them, and we will discuss the various aspects of Keras, how to create deep learning models through Keras. So Keras is built over various different libraries, TensorFlow, CNDK, MXNet, and Theano, and all of these are responsible for interacting with CPUs, GPUs, and TPUs. So CPU is central processing unit, GPU is graphics processing unit, and TPU is tensor processing unit, which is actually uh, made famous by Google and its uh, subsidiaries. So since we are working on Google Colab, we get an already configured installation of Keras. And okay, so over here, if all those people who have already attended the first leg of this two-part FTP, over there also I had discussed the application of Colab. Colab is can be called co-laboratory provided by Google. So you can access this through URL research collab.research.google.com. So if you open this web page, colab.research.google.com, you will be able to see this page, and in fact I can open it. So if I open this URL, it will prompt me to open one of the notebooks. So if you have worked on Jupyter Notebook, you would observe that a lot of things provided in Colab is very similar to Jupyter Notebook. So over here, I can open one of the notebook. It says new notebook, or you can open one of the existing notebook. If I click on new notebook, it will open a new notebook for me. But I'm going to cancel it because I don't need it. I already have this notebook with me. So this is the notebook which I have prepared for introduction to deep learning, and I give introduction of deep learning through Keras to my students. Over here, you can prepare, all of these are cells. Okay, so these are markdown cells in which I can write anything. There are two types of cell, code cell and text cell. And this is the menu. This is the menu, file, edit, view, all of these things. So you can access, you can open Colab file, you can create new Colab file, and you can explore this menu option. Not very tough. Over here, you can create text. So instead of PPT, I discuss my lectures in PPT as well. But I find it very useful because I have all the text written. I can refer to this text, like in this lecture, I'm also referring to the text that I want. Then at the same time, I can pass it on to my students as a class node, because you see this is COVID time and it is very tough on faculties as well as the students. The students are not able to take notes, faculties are not. We had this habit of writing on the board, but now everything has to be done on the touch screen, so I'm not very happy with that, but I prepare it so that students may take this as note. So I write all these important things as I would have prepared my notes for myself, and I write these things over here. So you can also utilize Colab, since this is a faculty development program and our whole focus should be to collaborate within ourselves, share our experiences, something you might have to teach me, something I might have learned to probably discuss with you. So this is one thing I always encourage everyone to work on Google Colab. With this, we can create beautiful presentations, beautiful visualizations, and beautiful lectures. So over here, I will be working on Keras library, and as I said, Keras works over TensorFlow, CNTK, MXNet, and Theano. These are the libraries provided by various different companies. Like TensorFlow is created by Google, CNTK is created by Microsoft. Okay, now there are in this lecture actually that I had prepared for my students, I was going to discuss the introductory concepts of MLPs, CNN, and RNN. MLP stands for multi-layer perceptron. A neuron, a single neuron that we talked about is a perceptron. Okay, there are some literature in which perceptron and neuron has a difference, in which a perceptron is something which does not have an activation function. However, neuron has an activation function. So if I could just scroll a bit and show you the difference over here. Yeah, over here, as you can see in this pictorial representation, as Dr. Tiwari has already discussed, that a lot of inputs get into a neuron, and these inputs are weighted input. They are not simply the inputs passed on as it is. There are weight values associated with every input along with the bias. So bias has an input of 1 and its weight is called the bias, and rest of the inputs like x1 to xn, they are the actual input taken from the data, and with every input we have a weight value associated. All these combine together to create a weighted sum. Okay, so this summation function that is depicted over here represents that it is a weighted sum. So I will multiply 1 with b and add, I will multiply x1 with w1 and add x2 with w2 and add x3 with w3 and add it all together. So this is a weighted sum. Now, if this weighted sum is the output, if this weighted sum, if I could annotate, so if this weighted sum is the input, I forget that there is an activation function. Suppose I forget there is an activation function, and this activation itself is the output, then this is called perceptron. Okay. However, if this is not the case, if this is not the case, there is an activation function. Okay, this summation is passed on to an activation function, and activation function produces something which is presented as output. Then this arrangement is called a neuron. Okay, but I'm not saying that take it to heart. Keep it as an understanding. If somebody asks what is the difference between perceptron and neuron, probably you can express it. However, there are differences in the literature. Okay, so you will find both kind of literature in which people depict perceptron along with these activation functions as well. So more or less perceptron and neurons are basically same, with perceptron having an identity activation function. If this activation function becomes an identity function, then ultimately your summation weighted sum is the output it becomes. So perceptron also has an activation function, but that activation function is the identity function. Right. So over here, I will assume this to be multilayer perceptron. We will discuss what is multilayer perceptron. Then there are recurrent neural networks. There is a lecture scheduled on recurrent neural network by Professor Shikhar Verma, a professor and a dean of IIIT Allahabad, and probably he will discuss graph convolutional neural networks. So CNN will be discussed by me. So I'll discuss MLPs today and CNN probably tomorrow. Okay. So MLP stands for multi-layer perceptron, RNN stands for recurrent neural network, and CNN stands for convolutional neural network. The difference between MLP, CNN, and RNN is that MLPs are fully connected neural network. Okay, they have got dense layers where one layer is connected to next layer, and all the neurons of first layer are connected to all the neurons of second layer. And this goes in the forward direction. There is no recurrence, there is no cycle. You will often find them referred to as either deep feed forward network or feed forward neural network in some literature. MLPs are common in simple logistic and linear equation problems. MLPs are not optimal for processing sequential and multidimensional data pattern. When I say sequential, its meaning is that there has to be a sequence, and that sequence need to be important. When I say sequence, so what sequence has to be there? Like suppose I give you the sentence, I read a sentence, my name is Dr. Munindra Ojha. So when I say this thing, I have all the words that I have spoken in a particular sequence. Okay, I cannot play with this sequence. I cannot mumble jumble this sequence. I have to have this sequence of words in this correct sequence, and that is what is grammar. So grammar forces me to put these words in the sequence. So if I have to maintain the sequence, then MLPs are not useful. Okay, I need a kind of network which can maintain, which can remember this sequence. My name is. So I cannot say his name is my. Okay, that sequence is not allowed. The sequence in which I'm saying the word or the input is important. And similarly, if you have the share market data, the time series data in which the data is associated with time. So time goes in forward direction. Okay, so data should also be in the forward direction, and there has to be a sequence of the data values that are provided. So time series data is another example of data which requires certain importance to the sequence in which the data is presented. Then multidimensional data pattern in images are multidimensional. They have got 2 dimensions. In fact, if you have multiple images, they got 3 dimensions. So 2 dimensions for a single image, and third dimension as the number of images. So this is multidimensional data, and for multidimensional data, MLPs are very burdensome, okay, troublesome. Then another example of multidimensional data is video data, in which there are sequence of images, frames of video data, which are presented to the neural network for processing. So that is also another example of multidimensional data. For these kind of data problems and the uh, problem domain, multi-layer perceptrons are not useful. They are not helpful. Okay. So as it says, by design, MLP struggle to remember pattern in sequential data and requires a substantial number of parameters to process in case of multidimensional data. That is why MLPs are not useful. For sequential data, RNN are popular, and RNN have different variations like gated recurrent units, long short term memory units, LSTM. So LSTM and GRUs are different type of network which are categorized as recurrent neural network, and they are very useful. They are very good in remembering the sequence in which the data has been presented. Okay. So and then CNN is useful in processing multidimensional data. So multidimensional data like images and videos can be utilized, can be processed with convolutional neural network. Okay, let me share with you the attendance link, and this is the link of
Sir,
yeah,
sir, I have a question. Can I ask?
yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, what is the difference between the sequential and non-sequential model? Like you have written that MLPs are good for linear and logistic regression problems, and MLP is not optimal for
Yeah,
processing sequential.
MLP
What
is
is the
good
meaning of
for
that?
linear. MLPs are common in simple linear logistic problem. Yeah, okay, that's what I told you. Na? MLPs are fully connected. Okay, an example of MLP is over here. You see. So this is layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, and if I give you this GIF example, then this is what is here. Okay, so this is a
Okay.
fully connected neural network in which all the neurons of first layer are connected to all the neurons of second layer, and subsequently all the neurons second are connected to all the neurons of third layer. This is called dense neural net, dense layer.
Densely.
In
Okay.
this case, there are a lot many parameters to be learned, and they are redundant parameters. So
Mm-hmm.
if we have simple linear problem, linear regression problem, or logistic regression, which is a classification algorithm, such kind of classification or regression problem, then MLPs are useful. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If we
Yes, sir.
have a problem in which sequence is important, sequence means, as I gave you this example, my name is Dr. Munir Oja. Okay,
Yes, sir.
so
Yes, sir.
this sentence, if I have to feed this sentence as an input, then the
Yes, sir.
order in which I am speaking these words are very important, right?
Okay.
So
Okay,
I
sir.
cannot say Doctor, my name Oja Munindra is something like that. I cannot
Okay.
randomly feed these words. These words have to be fed in proper order, and that order is defined by grammar, right?
Oh, okay,
So
sir.
grammar forces me to have importance on the sequence of words. Now this sequence has to be maintained, otherwise there is no meaning in the language.
Yes, sir.
So if I have to preserve this sequence, then MLP is useless, because in MLP, in this example, you see, there is no technique which is remembering the sequence. However, RNNs have some techniques introduced in them which remember the sequence in which data has been presented. So that is RNN. And similarly for CNN, you need to have kind of a two-dimensional image in which we are looking for pattern. So
Yes,
if a
sir.
pattern is present in one portion, that pattern can be the same portion can be utilized to look for the pattern in whole image. So
Mm-hmm.
I can utilize certain characteristic of finding the pattern with which I can look for a pattern in whole image. And in this MLP, you see there are a lot of edges which are not useful. They don't work, and they are not at all required. But we
Yes, sir.
don't have any method or mechanism with which we can identify the useless edges, redundant nodes. So these are not
Mm.
provided to us. That is why more advanced versions like RNN and CNN were introduced, in which we are able to reduce the number of edges, we are able to reduce the number of nodes, and we are able to introduce the importance of sequence in our network. Okay.
Okay, sir. Sir, one last question, if you please allow me. And the question goes like this: that exactly can we use these CNNs for the structured problems,
What kind of structure problem?
like where we have features like any banking data?
You can use any type of neural network for any type of problem. Okay. The concept is the difference is whether it will be able to give you better result or not. That's the only difference. Okay. So if you have CNN are used for finding the pattern. Even if I can utilize it in in sequential data also, I can implement CNN. I can like handwritten digit recognition. Suppose I have this problem I have discussed over here. So in handwritten digit recognition problem itself, it's an image, okay, but I can work on that problem through MLPs, through CNN, and through RNNs. I can utilize all of them. The only difference will be how good the result you get. Okay.
Okay, okay.
So, like CNN have lesser number of parameters. We do some parameter sharing over there. So we
That's
save a
why
lot of
that's
time.
why we use sequential model, because in CNN the concept is very clear that first we use filters to extract feature maps, and then we use pooling and all the other things one by one. That's why we use
Exactly.
sequential model. Okay, sir. Thank you,
Exactly.
sir.
Okay. Right. So let's move on. Okay. And these things have already been discussed by Dr. Tiwari. There are, you see, I will just skip through. This is a layered architecture of neural network in which we provide the image at the, if I assume it to be moving from left to right, you assume at the left hand side you have the original input, and input layer is there, but remember there are no neurons in input layer. Okay. So over here in this GIF, if you follow me, I am saying that there are no neurons in input layer. All these are just called unit. Okay, all these nodes, these circular nodes are called unit. If I have to have a neuron has to do some functionality, and the functionality of neuron is like this. It has to take a weighted sum, and then that weighted sum will be passed on to activation function. The result of activation function will be the output. So this computation model is the neuron. So neuron performs this computation. Neuron is a composite function which is a function of two functions. First function is weighted sum, and the second function is application of output of weighted sum into this activation function. So it is a composite function. Neuron is a composite function. However, in input layer, there is no functionality. There is no mathematical function which is executing. It is just presenting the input to the neural network. So over here you see the leftmost block is representing original input. This is just here to present the input. Now layer 1 is the actual layer with which computation starts. So layer 1 should be called the first hidden layer. Computation of layer 1, output of layer 1 is passed on to output to layer 2 as input. Then layer 2 is the second hidden layer. It performs some computation, produces an output, and presents that output as input to the third layer. So output of third layer will be input to fourth layer. Output of fourth layer will be input to the output layer. So now this is output layer. And again at output layer, you have got neurons. So neurons are present in hidden layer and output layer, but not in input layer. Okay. So we have this kind of system in which one image is presented, one data sample is presented, and depending upon the data, some of the neurons will fire, some of the neurons will not fire. Okay. If I phrase my sentence in other words, I would say some of the neurons activate themselves and some of the neurons don't activate. Like these black ones are not activating. So first layer has got some neurons which are activating, second layer has got some neurons which are activating, and third layer, which is the output layer, has got a single neuron which is activating. Is there some problem? I think host having network issue. Is there any problem, Mr. Srinivas?
No, sir, it is audible to us.
Okay.
Perfect.
Sir, it is audible to us. No problem.
Okay.
No
No
issue.
problem.
Continuously disconnecting, Mr. Srinivas, probably your network is not all right. You can check. Okay, thanks. So this output layer, only one neuron is activating itself. This activation tells us that the output of this whole neural network is the value at the neuron which is activating, right? You see in this GIF, if I presented the image of digit 7, the neuron which is responsible for representing digit 7 is activating. If I presented handwritten image of digit 2, then only the neuron which is responsible for presenting digit 2 is activating, and so on. So only those neurons will activate themselves which are responsible for recognizing the image or the pattern or the data. Now MLP is shown in this, all these are MLPs, multi-layer perceptron. They have got dense layers. Dense layer means all the neuron of that layer is connected to all the neurons of next layer, right? A neuron works like this. I have a neuron, and neuron takes weighted input, adds all of these weighted input, and the result of weighted sum is presented to an activation function. Activation function can be of many different types. The output of activation function is the output of that artificial neuron. So neuron is a mathematical function that takes one or more input values and outputs a single numerical value. That is all a neuron is about. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay. Although we represent them as circles, squares, rectangles, so many different representation, but ultimately all these are just composite function. Okay, composition of these two functions. So as Dr. Tiwari was also talking about over here, you see, we have this kind of representation in which inputs are represented by x1 up to xn, and along with input we have a bias value. So bias is given a weight of w0. So over here, if I is starting from 1, let's say x1, x2 up to xn, then I can also include a weight value associated with bias, or I can call the bias itself my weight value with an input value of I can write it like this. I can write it like this. So Bn bias value plus 1 dot 1. So B is the weight, or instead of Bn, I can call it W0, right? The same I can call it as W naught X naught, right? W naught X naught. So you see, I got it in the same pattern. Sorry, I can take it over here. So W naught dot x naught. Okay, so x naught w naught x I w I, and if x is I is starting from 1 over here, instead of 1 I can start from 0, and that will take care of the bias thing. So bias can be represented as w0, and it will give me a single function as hn equal to summation I equal to 0 up to n x to w0. That's all. Where x0, sorry, this is xi, right? At xi. xi, right? So 0 indicates for bias, and rest of these things, rest of these subscript represent your input from 1 to n, right? Input from 1 to n. That's it. So this is the mathematical function. Now activation function can be of many different types. The most famous one is the sigmoid activation function, which is given as 1 upon 1 plus e to the power minus x. This is also called as logistic function. Okay, sigmoid function is also called as logistic function. So you try to observe over here that z, the legit, we call this z as legit. Legit is what? It is nothing but a weighted sum of all the input along with bias. So if this legit is passed on to this f, this becomes a neuron. The y is actually the output of a neuron. This whole thing becomes a neuron. Equation number 1 and 2 combined becomes a neuron. If f is identity function, if f is identity function, you would agree with me that I have only f function 1. Okay, equation number 1. Then equation number 1 is simply a linear regression, right? If f is identity function, then there is no equation number 2. I'm not at all applying any function on z. So z is itself a linear regression, right? And solving linear regression problem is just like solving the coefficient, finding out these coefficient wi's for x. Okay, so however, that is a linear regression. However, if f is something else, f has an activation function, then that can be applied over here as a neuron. So from linear regression, we move towards neuron with the application of this activation function. Okay, this activation function is something which is extra from the linear regression. Now, if f is a linear function, what if f is not identity function, but it is a linear function? So in that case, you try to understand, this is the problem that neural network had, and that actually tried to solve it, that if there is a perceptron, then let me annotate over here. The problem which comes to us is that the perceptron can find a boundary between the set of data values which are linearly separable. Suppose this is, I am drawing over here a set of values. So pink dots, and then suppose red dots. Okay, there are red dots and there are pink dots, and these are data values. These are data values. Now these data values are linearly separable. If they are linearly separable, I should be able to find a straight line with which I can separate these data points. This is the concept of linearly separable data. However, if data points are like this, that they are not linearly separable. Okay, these data points are not linearly separable. What happens in that case? And this data point is not linearly separable. Okay, if data points are not linearly separable, then the linear classifier we cannot find any linear classifier which will be able to successfully classify all the points. So wherever I put this linear classifier, I'll not be able to segregate the pink points from the red point. So that is the problem with linear classifier. Okay. So in case of neural network, the computational ability or the actual efficiency of neural network would have reduced drastically if there is no activation function. If there is no activation function, or if there is a linear activation function, then the same problem that I'm telling you of inseparability of non-linear separable points will be there. So I'll not be able to find a plane which will be able to separate out these linearly inseparable points. So what is the solution? The solution is to create a boundary which is non-linear. Okay, so instead of finding this boundary, I will remove this. I will try to find out a boundary which is non-linear. Okay, so non-linear could be anything. Non-linear could be like this. I find, sorry, let me, everything's gone. Sorry, I clicked somewhere and all these points are gone. Okay, so let me, so suppose I have a set of points like this, and then I change the color. Let me take blue, these blue ones. Okay. Now this is also kind of arrangement which is not linearly separable, and I'm talking about 2 dimension. Please don't get into 3 dimension or higher dimension, because when we go in upper dimension, and there is a theorem which says that all the points are linearly separable in infinite dimension. So this is a possibility that these 2 data points are separable in 3rd dimension, but I'm talking about 2nd dimension only. I mean 2-dimensional space on the plane only. So in 2-dimensional space, I can find a boundary which is actually, I cannot find a linear boundary which can separate out these linearly inseparable data points. See, whatever line I will create, whatever line I will try to find out, it will not be able to separate out these data points. So what do? We can create, instead of single separator, single plane, hyperplane, or single hyperline, we can create multiple hyperlines or hyperplanes like this over here, you see. Okay, in this example, you observe that instead of single point, I have created multiple boundaries, and through multiple boundaries, I was able to segregate the pink points from the blue points. Blue points are enclosed within the kind of quadrilateral that is created, and all the pink points are out of this quadrilateral. However, that is not an optimum solution, because then in that case you do not know how many linear boundaries you will need to create. Okay, so the idea is to find out a non-linear boundary or non-linear separator function, non-linear function, okay, which can separate out. Non-linear means I need to create a boundary. If green is the color with which I need to create a boundary, I need to find out a mathematical function which will represent this circle, and with this circle I'll be able to say that okay, this circle is the mathematical function or the equation of the hyperplane or hyper surface which is able to segregate the 2 data points. So now I have been able to find out a hyperplane, hypersurface, which is able to segregate, classify 2 points. Okay, find out a boundary between 2 set of points. So this is, but this is not a linear function. This is a non-linear function. So in case of neural network, why I'm talking about this non-linearity over here? Because in case of neural network, the neuron is a linear function, C, X, I, W, I, as long as it is not connected with this activation function, which is non-linear. Okay, so neurons are a linear function if I do not introduce this activation function, which is non-linear. Okay, if I introduce an activation function which is linear, so then again the neural network becomes a linear classifier, linear separator. Am I mute? Are you not able to listen to me? Tilottama is saying for past 10 minutes, not at all audible.
We can listen to you.
Yeah, I think there is some disturbance with the your host network. Okay, fine. So at this point, I will say the difference between linearity and non-linearity is introduced by this activation function, the activation function f. How it is introduced? This activation function has to be a non-linear activation function. Only then the non-linearity is introduced. So if somebody asks you how non-linearity is introduced in neural network, or probably the question could be whether neural network is a linear classifier or a non-linear classifier, then their answer is actually neural network is a non-linear classifier, because we introduce activation function over there, and these activation functions are non-linear by nature. The objective of introducing activation function is to introduce non-linearity in the algorithm, whole algorithm. And this non-linearity gives it tremendous power, because in that case we can simulate any type of non-linearity, and that non-linearity will be able to create the boundary, the classifier boundary which can segregate different type of data points. Okay, some questions are there and I don't know, I'm not finding them in the chat box. Are they? These are popping up and I am not in question answer. There are no questions. So, okay, there are Rituraj. No OD hidden layer is hyperparameter. There is no such rule for number of hidden layer. Okay, if you have any question, probably we can discuss at the end of the session. How to decide internal hidden network, any formula? No, there is no formula. It is a hyperparameter. We decide before creating the neural network. We have to decide how many layers we want, and this is our decision, the decision of the person who is creating the neural network. Okay, we just perform hit and trial, and the best thing is to start with some literature, in look at standard neural network and start from there. So suppose I start from AlexNet and I have got 5 hidden layers, then I will start testing AlexNet, and then if my result is not good, I will modify that by reducing some hidden layer or by introducing some hidden layer. Okay, and that is the fundamental concept with every hyperparameter in machine learning, that values of hyperparameters are not something which can be learned. You have to perform hit and trial to find out the optimal value. And one more thing over here, in lot of different student project, when we ask a student to present their project, they would tell us that this is the value, we have taken 0.5, we have taken 0.7, we have taken 0.2 value. And the immediate question that comes to mind, and from every expert, they ask, who prompted you to take this value 0.2? Who prompted you to take this value 0.5? How did you choose this value? So the answer is not that this is the best value I thought, okay, or probably I read it somewhere, or probably somebody told me. No, the answer is I experimented with different set of values like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, and among these values I found out that 0.2 was giving the best result, right? So this is how we find out the values of parameter. So if I tell you that number of layers, hidden layer, then I will say that, okay, I experimented with, over here in this example, I will say that I experimented with 5 different layers, 2 layer, 3 layer, 4 layer, and I found out that if 1 layer was giving poor result, 2 layer was giving very good result. When I increased it to 3 layer, the time of computation increased, but the quality of result did not increase. So I will choose 2 layer as my optimum value. Is it really the system do the self-intelligence learning or some interpolation, extrapolation data set? In terms of, no, hyperparameter, like how many neurons per layer, how many layers, these are the things that you have to decide, and this is called hyperparameter. The concept of hyperparameter is there are some parameter which are learned by the model. When we create a model, like this is a model that we will create in our lecture. When we create a model, there are parameters. So what are parameters? These are the parameter values, the weight value, which are associated with every edge. These are the parameter values which are learned by the model. They will learn it. But hyperparameter are those parameters which are needed to create the model. If I am going to create the model, then I need some parameter, and they are called hyperparameter. For example, the question as you asked, how many layers? Yes, I need to decide how many layers. That is a hyperparameter. Okay. Then I need to decide how many neurons will be there in every layer. That is again a hyperparameter. I need to decide before I create the model. I need to decide how many neurons there should be in that layer. Will there be same number of neuron in every layer? I don't know. Again, I'll have to decide. All these decisions are creating some value for hyperparameter. And again, I'm saying I do not know any value and I do not recommend any value. What I recommend is you experiment with different set of values like 1 layer, 2 layer, 3 layer, 4 layer, 5 layer, and then observe the output. If your output is gradually increasing, keep on changing the value. If it starts to decrease, okay, stop. Choose that value as your hyperparameter. Okay. Will different layer have different activation function? They are totally free to have different activation function. Okay, I will stop the question answer now because these things I'm going to discuss. Okay, quickly moving on. So this is sigmoid function which has S function shape and it takes values from 0 to 1. That is why it is also used as a probability function because at the end probability values range from 0 to 1. So whatever output we get, we tell that this is the probability of this output. So we utilize sigmoid function. Now in this example, I'm going to take this case of MNIST data set and I will share this Colab file with you also so you can work on it and see it yourself. In Colab, let me connect over here. When it connects, it tells you that it is trying to connect the hosted runtime, then it is connecting and it is connecting to Python 3 Google Compute Engine backend. Okay, you see over here. It is initializing, now it is connected. It is connected to Python and it tells me it is connected to Python 3 Google Compute Engine backend. RAM I'm using is 0.75 GB and hard disk I'm using is 36 GB. Okay. So I'm going to use this MNIST dataset, Modified National Institute of Standard and Technology dataset. Is often considered this is the hello world of deep learning. Okay, it has got 60,000 images in training and 10,000 test set. Digits range from 0 to 9. We all know. Okay. Right. So this I will just read through. Target or ground truth is also used to refer as label. Okay. So label means if this is the image, label will be digit 4. Okay. So with this example, I'm going to run this cell. I run this cell by pressing Shift Enter. If I click on here and I press Shift Enter, this cell will be executed. What I'm importing over here is that from future means even if there are future updates, these things have to be implemented and these things have to remain active. So after this, what I'm importing is NumPy as NP. So I'll refer to as NP. I imported TensorFlow Keras dataset, and from this I am importing MNIST. Okay, so I can import this dataset directly from the Keras library, Keras dataset library. And again, I'm importing pyplot, matplot.pyplot as PLT. So I'll refer to as the short form PLT because I need to visualize the images and the graphs. Now I'm loading this dataset. So if I run this, I can run every code cell using two things. Either by pressing Control Enter, okay, or by pressing Shift Enter. If I press Control Enter, the cell which is active, okay, the cell remains same, the active cell remains same, fine. Attention at which I am at remains same, but if I press Shift Enter, the attention moves to next cell. That is the only difference. Okay, Control Enter means attention remains over again this cell, and Shift Enter, the attention moves to next cell. So you see over here, I have loaded the dataset. Dataset is loaded in terms of two tuples. Two tuples are given to me. One tuple contains X trend, Y trend, means all the training samples, means 60,000 samples over here, and 60,000 labels. Okay. And then X test and Y test, 10,000 data values and 10,000 labels corresponding to that. And you see, when I put this cursor over here, it tells me the shape. The shape of the test data that I have downloaded is 10,000, 28, 28. That tells me that there are 10,000 images. Every image has a dimension of 28 by 28 pixel, means 28 pixel wide and 28 pixel long. Now over here, the value that is returned is 10,000 comma 28 comma 28. With this information, I want to emphasize upon one fact that tensor, every time we are working on tensor flow, so we are dealing with tensor. Now what is a tensor? Tensor is a data structure, just like arrays. Tensors are also arrays, but multi-dimensional arrays. Okay. So tensor is nothing but a multi-dimensional array with some specialty. The first specialty is that it's multi-dimensional. Okay. Second is that the zeroth dimension or the zeroth axis of this tensor always contains the number of samples. Like over here, you see, as you can observe, this tells me, I have put my cursor over here, and now this is telling me that there are 10,000 comma 28 comma 28. Shape of this array is 10,000 comma 28 comma 28. That tells me that first axis, the zeroth axis of tensor, this is a tensor. Okay, tensor is a multi-dimensional array. The value, the data has been downloaded in this tensor ytest, and ytest has this shape in which zeroth axis represents 10,000, means there are 10,000 samples. Always with every tensor, the zeroth axis will always represent the number of samples. Okay. So this represents number of samples. There are 10,000 samples. Second axis represents either the width or the height or the dimension or the number of samples. So in this case, this is a multi-dimensional data. This is a multi-dimensional data. We have got height and width. Height is 28 pixel, width is 28 pixel. So height and width is represented over here, right? For X test. Now, so I run this and you see, if I want to find out how many samples per label, so you see this has already been executed. So I don't need to run it. Even if I run it, see these are the values. So for 0 in train, we have got 5,928. For testing train 1, 6,742 and so on. So if I just want to visualize, let's say first 25 images. Okay, let's visualize first 25 images. These are the first 25 images that are there in the input data set. Now I'm going to set the data. Data has to be converted into proper format so that it could be utilized by the network. Okay. So we have this data. I have already downloaded this data, right? And just in case, this is the data set that has been downloaded. Before discussing the model implementation, the data must be in the correct shape and format. So to put the correct data in the correct shape and format, what we do is we convert it to categorical data. Why am I calling it categorical data? Because you see, categorical data in this case is a one hot vector that I'm going to create. One hot vector means the output will be compared. Okay. As Dr. Tiwari talked about the error, right? So when I have an error, how a neural network learns? Neural network learns by experience. So we do a supervised learning. I hope everybody is comfortable with what is difference between supervised and unsupervised learning. In supervised learning, we provide a target. Okay. Then whatever output is generated by the model, we compare that output with the target. So target versus output, actual output. The difference between these two, the target and the output, is called error, right? Then we utilize this error and try to force the model, machine learning model, to learn so that error is gradually reduced so that it becomes zero at some point of time. It doesn't become 0, but ultimately that is our target. So we have a target label and we have an actual output. The difference between target and output is the error. We propagate error backward in this neural network such that neural network learns. When I say neural network learns, can anybody tell me what is the learning and what is actually changing when it learns? Hmm? Weight change, exactly. So this in this neural network, you see what is changing. If I have to train it, there are a lot of things which are decided. There are number of input number of input is already decided. It depends upon how what is your image size. So image size, whatever image is coming to neural network, that is beyond the control of neural network. Neural network has no control over what is the input. So input can be anything depending upon the problem. Over here it is 28 by 28 means 784 values. So number of input or type of input is beyond control of neural network. How many neurons there are in a layer, that is again decided, pre-decided before the neural network is created, that is pre-decided. Okay, then how many layers there are, that is also pre-decided hyperparameter. We decide and then we create the neural network. Then what is actually changing? The change is the weight value. The weight value associated with every edge is the thing that is changing. So when I say the neural network is learning, it is trying to modify its weight values, weight value of this part, weight value of these, weight value of these, weight value of these. So weight value between input h1, h1 means first hidden layer, h1 to h2 means first hidden layer to second hidden layer, and h2 to output, so second hidden layer to output. The weight values between these connection are the things that are changing, and by gradually changing, updating these weight value, neural network updates itself. Okay, just like we have our memory. In memory also, we don't remember anything immediately. Many people might have photographic memory, but normally people don't have photographic memory. So how do we learn? We continuously learn by updating, revising, cramming, so many times, revising so many times, reading so many times, so that we remember. And when we remember, it remains with us. And what remains with us? These weight values. Okay, so our see, our brain is not going to change. Number of neurons that our brain has not going to change. So what is changing? The number of connections that are established between neurons. Our brain has got 11 billion neurons, but 11 billion remains same. And out of 11 billion, as a lot of literature goes on, we don't even utilize 3% of our number of neurons that are given in the brain. So if we are not utilizing even 3% of our brain, then what is changing over here? The connection between these neurons. Okay, so these connections, they are changing. And how they are changing? They are changing the weight value. So this is the learning that happens in case of neural network. So if that is the case, you see, so I have to have our data in the proper format. Now this is the proper format. How do we say this is the proper format? In the output layer, I have got 10 neurons. Okay, and suppose my input is a digit 7. Okay, so if input is digit 7, then first neuron should give me 0, second neuron should give me 0, third neuron should give me 0, 4 should give me 0, 5 should give me 0, 6 should give me 0, 7 should give me 0, and 8th neuron, which actually represent digit 7, because first neuron is representing digit 0. So the 8th neuron, which represents digit 7, should have a value of 1. That is my target. That is my label. So I will present this target to my neural network. And how will I present it? In this fashion. So you see, in this fashion, what I'll present, this is called one hot encoding. So I will encode my label. My label was, let me get So 0th is 1, then 2, it's taking 2 big space, 3, sorry, it's not like that. This is, it's already labeled, so I don't need to label. So this will be 0, 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 this will be 1. Now this will be 0 and this will be 0. All of these values, now this is a vector that I will put in front of this neural network as a target. Now this is target, okay? What it actually outputs is altogether different matter. This is target. With this target, I will ask my neural network, that see neural network, when I give you digit 7, okay, when I give you digit 7, you should keep all the neuron output as 0 except this neuron. This neuron should have an output of 1 and remaining them should be 0. All these should be 0, only one of them must be 1. So this is a target I am presenting to my neural network. And with the same pattern, I will change the output of all my training and testing samples. The label that I am giving to, so over here I use the two categorical function and convert yTrain, means all the labels with the training sample, and two categorical to convert all the labels with the test samples to one hot encoded format. Now I need to reshape the input. My input was two-dimensional, 28 by 28. I need to convert it to vector because I am utilizing an MLP over here. This is an MLP, multi-layer perceptron. Okay, I am not using CNN, MLP only. For MLP, I need a vector. My input is in the format of vector. You see, a single vector. So all the 28 by 28 two-dimensional images should be converted to a single dimension. So if it is pixel 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, pixel 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, pixel 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, 3, it has to be converted into vector format such that I have 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, and 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, 3 format. So I have 9 pixels over here in a vector format. Now, once I convert them into vector format, I also need these values to normalize. Okay, normalize means I need to normalize, bring them between 0 to 1. So I need to convert them into 0 to 1. And why do I need to bring them between 0 to 1? Because you see, it's all mathematical function. Okay, and of course, if I compare 1, if I have some value, and it is a grayscale image, right? So values range from 0 to 255. If I have some pixel which has got value 0 versus some pixel which has got value 255, you very well understand that 0 does not hold any ground with respect to 255. If I have to add 255 to something and versus add 0 to something, the difference in result will be huge, difference of 255. And if I keep on doing these things, the difference gets on increasing. However, in an image, the value 0 is as important to me as the value 255, because value 0 is just representing lack of white value. Okay, lack of white value, so it is 0 color. Means black color. Lack value 0 just represents color black, and value 255 represents color white. Now black is equally important to me as white pixel. Black pixel is also important, white pixel is also important. But if I compare them mathematically, 0 versus 255, 0 has got very small importance with respect to 255. So what I'll do, I will convert them such that they don't have this big a difference. So I'll normalize them to bring between 0 to 1. And to do that, it is very easy. I'll just divide all values by 255. Okay, I'll divide all values, all pixel value by 255, and that will bring my input values between 0 to 1, that will normalize it. And that is what I am doing over here. First, I am changing the shape. I'm reshaping it to make it a vector. Okay, as I told you over here, instead of 2 by 2, I need a single unidimensional vector. So over here, I'm reshaping it, and then I'm converting it to bring between 0 to 1. Instead of 0 to 255, I'll bring it between 0 to 1, and for that, I'm dividing by 255. So let me run some of the things which I have not run. I have run this cell. Okay, and then I run this cell. Okay, now my input is in the perfect order. I need to build a neural network model through Keras. So for that, there are few things that we need to know. Okay, it is a densely connected neural network. It's an MLP, so all the layers are densely connected. Some of these values are hyperparameter, as over here I have discussed. See, the proposed model is made of 3 multi-layer perceptron layers. Both the first and second MLP layers are identical in nature with 256 units each, followed by ReLU activation function and a dropout. Now over here, some of the things that we normally do. The number of neurons in every layer is normally a multiple of 2. Okay, so like over here you see they have tested with number of neurons as 128 number of neurons, 256 number of neurons, 512 number of neurons, and 1024 number of neurons. Okay, so it's always easy to report, and we have number of neurons always as multiple of 2. So as it says, at 128 unit, the network converges quickly but has a lower test accuracy. That is why 128 neurons were not preferred. So what happened? They tried with 256 unit, then 512 unit, and 1024 unit. But then it says, apart from 256, which again gives a good result, 512 and 1024 does not increase the test accuracy significantly. Okay, so I will not go for 512 neurons or 1024 neuron in the hidden layer. I will be satisfied with 256 because that is giving me fair enough accuracy. Okay, so hyperparameter value is decided. Now how many layers? Let's decide it to be 2. Okay, without any experimentation. Now there are few concepts: batch size, hidden unit, and dropout. Hidden unit 256, as we computed over here, that okay, 256 gives us a good enough result. What is batch size? Batch size is something which we decide. Again, this is a hyperparameter. When we perform training of neural network, there are 3 possibilities of training the neural network, and depending upon these 3 possibilities, there are 3 mechanisms, 3 names. One is called stochastic gradient descent. Okay, I'm talking about the most basic. Most basic means gradient descent. When we train neural network, I will not get into detail of that because that is for that I'll have to discuss the method of training. But over here, I will just tell you. I will discuss briefly. So there are 3: stochastic gradient descent, and batch gradient descent, then a mini batch gradient descent. In mini batch gradient descent, what we do? Okay, let's start with stochastic. In stochastic, what we do? We feed one input to the neural network and create the output. We compare that output with the target, produce the error, and propagate the gradient of error backward so that neural network learns, modifies itself. And this cycle happens for every input. That is called stochastic gradient descent. The algorithm is gradient descent, and this variation of gradient descent is called stochastic gradient descent. Then there is another extreme in which we don't perform this cycle of updation with every input. We wait till we have fed all 60,000. We have got 60,000 samples over here. So we will feed all 60,000 samples in the forward direction. That is called feed forward. So we will perform feed forward of 60,000 samples and then keep on calculating the error of all 60,000 samples. So how many errors we will have? We will have 60,000 errors. We will add all of these errors together and then perform one back propagation in which we will update the weight values depending upon the gradient of these 60,000 accumulated errors. That is called batch gradient. However, both of these extremes are not followed in practice. What we practice is mini batch gradient in which instead of saving 60,000 errors, because we'll have to wait till we have fed all the 60,000. We don't wait that much. We create a small batches like over here. We have created a batch of size 128 samples. So we will feed 128 samples in the forward direction, accumulate all 128 errors, add all of these 128 errors together, and then perform a back propagation for updation of the weight. Okay. Now, so this 128 is a batch. Now I have how many samples do I have? 60,000. So how many batches would I require? 60,000 divided by 128. Okay. So if I just take a very simple calculator and I divide 60,000 by 128, I get this value 468.75, right? Now tell me, how many batches will be required for 60,000 sample training? How many batches? Anyone? If one batch contains 128 sample and I have got 60,000 samples and I divide 60,000 by 128, the result is 468. Okay, 0.75. Now, of course, so 468.75. Remember, 0.75 is still there. So we will not require 468 iterations. We will need 469 iterations. Yes. So we will need 469 batches, right? Because one batch size is 128 and 60,000 divided by 128 gives me 468.75. So we will need one more than 468, that is 469 batches. Of course, in last batch, it will not be 128 images, lesser number of images will be there, but that doesn't matter. So I will require 469 batches. Now, when we have completed training 469 batches, that is called one epoch. Remember this thing very clearly. One epoch is, in our case, 469 batches of training with different samples. So one batch is 128 image. How many batches? 469 batches. And one epoch means completion of 469 batches. So one epoch is assumed to be completed when your neural network has seen all 60,000 samples at least once. That is called one epoch, right? Any doubt? Okay, there is a question. Can you tell the difference between batch size and epoch? Ms. Satvika, is it clear now? The difference between batch size and epoch?
So,
Okay, I hope. Fine. So move on. Okay. So I have decided the batch size, I have decided the number of hidden unit, and there is a dropout. What is dropout? I will explain in probably next class. Then this is the way our neural network is created in Keras. What I'm doing over here, I am first calling a class called sequential class, and this sequential class I have imported somewhere. I'll tell you where I have imported sequential class. Yeah, here. From TensorFlow Keras models, I import sequential. Now, sequential is a class that I've imported, which is telling me that it is a sequential model, not that sequential, the sequential data. No, model is sequential. Sequential means it follows a sequence. First input, then first hidden layer, then second hidden layer, then third hidden layer, so on and so forth, and then finally output layer. So data goes in the sequence from input to output. And then I have imported from here dense layer, activation layer, and dropout layer. Okay, from layers I have imported dense layer, activation layer, and dropout layer. I will discuss what they are. Then from utilities, Keras utilities package, I have imported two categorical and plot model. And then from dataset I have imported ML. These are all the things that you will need to import, and along with NumPy, of course. So what I see over here, to create this network, I will first create an object by calling this class sequential. If I call this a constructor, it will give me an object. I call this object model. To this model, I'll add the first hidden layer. Okay, this dense is the first hidden layer. Now you need to specify how many hidden units you will have. How many hidden units you will have? Like over here, we have decided that we will have 256 hidden units. Then what is the input dimension? Input dimension is again the number of input it is getting. Okay. So again, reminding you the same thing. We are not creating input layer. We are creating hidden layer. So if I'm creating hidden layer, the first hidden layer needs to know how many inputs it will get. Okay. So I need to specify input over here, and our input is decided by how many, what is the length of this vector, and length of this vector is 28 by 28, means 784. That we did over here, right? We got the input size 784 over here. So we need to specify the input size, and this will create the first hidden layer of our neural network. Then after that, I need to specify which activation function I'm going to use. I am using a ReLU activation function. Till now, I have discussed only SIGMAT activation function, and here I'm using ReLU activation function. What is ReLU? I will discuss in the next class. Then I'm using a dropout. Dropout is a kind of regularization technique. Regularization, you must all know from your machine learning class. In the last leg of FDP also, we had talked about regularization. Regularization L1, L2, all these type of regularizations we can implement. In deep learning, the most famous one is the dropout. I will explain something about dropout in the next class. Okay, so these three things combine together to create one layer. Then again, you have second hidden layer, and in second hidden layer, you see I'm just specifying number of units, which is 256 in our case, and not specifying what will be the input size, because input is already taken by the first hidden layer, and since it is a dense layer, all the output of previous layer will be connected to this layer as input. So this doesn't need to know the number of inputs, because the size of previous layer itself is the input size. Okay, so it will automatically know this information. So here I am not giving any number of input dimension, just specifying how many hidden units. Then along with this, I am specifying activation function ReLU. You can change this ReLU. You can have SIGMAT, you can have tan SIGMAT, you can have a leaky ReLU, stochastic ReLU, any kind of activation function. That is totally your choice. So again, answering the question, can we have different activation function in different layers? Yes, with this you can have it. And again, I am implementing a dropout. Then third hidden layer, third dense layer, which is am I audio that bad?
Sir,
Audible, sir.
your voice is cutting, breaking.
Is it for everybody? Somebody saying, Mr. Srinath is saying it is clear.
It's clear,
Oh,
sir,
Nalin.
for us.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay,
It's
okay,
clear,
so
sir.
I
Clear
think
for
that
us,
then
sir.
that the problem is not from my end, I suppose. I thought probably my network is not good. Okay.
No, no, sir, it's clear from your side.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. So see, this is the third layer. Third layer is the output layer. We had two hidden layer, and the third one is the output layer. In output, how many neurons do we need to have? Only 10 neurons. Why 10 neurons? Because 10 classes we need to have. So we specify the number of labels, okay? And at this point of time, I am specifying the activation function as softmax activation function. Why softmax? Again, I will discuss this in the next class. And then finally, I print the summary. So when I run this, I have run the previous one or not? Yeah, this one is run, and this one again, let me run it. And this, I am going to execute this cell. If I execute this cell, now this is the summary that I get of the neural network that I have created, the structure of the neural network. What it has first layer as dense as it specified the layer and the type. You see, now first layer is a dense layer, type is dense layer. Output none comma 256. None comma means this is the output shape, okay? And every time I am telling you, every time we are dealing with the data structure that we are dealing with is a tensor, okay? Tensor is a multi-dimensional data structure. The first dimension is always the number of samples. That is why the first dimension is put as none, while second dimension is being specified as 256. Because you see, why none? Because at this point of time, I have just created the structure of the model. I have not specified how many input I'm going to give to this neural network. So it doesn't know. But it has still kept this option that first 0th axis is reserved for the number of samples. In the first axis, it tells me that there are 256 values that will come. Okay. So first hidden layer generates 256 values, and number of parameters that needs to be learned is 20,000, 200,960 parameter. Means these many weight values it will have from input to the H1. Input to H1, between input to H1, there are 200,960 weight values that it will need to learn. Then I have activation function. I don't need to specify parameter over here. Then dropout, again I don't need to specify parameter. These are not the weight values. Then second hidden layer, again it has 256 neurons, so output is none comma 256. The number of parameter it needs to learn is 256 by 256 plus 1 bias value. So in this also there will be 784 input plus 1 bias value into 256. Okay, that's this value. Then for this one, 257 means 256 plus 1 bias into 256, that is 65,792. So this is second hidden layer. Now between second hidden layer to output layer, I need to have 256 plus 1 bias, that is 257, into 10, that is 2570, right? So we need to have these many parameters between second hidden layer and output layer. And finally, this will give me the 10 output. So in total, I need to have 269,322 parameter that I need to train in order to train this neural network. Now structure of neural network is created. Okay. And let me just skip this because I will discuss these things in the next class, and I give you the execution. Something or Miss, um, please mute yourself if you don't have any question. Please mute yourself. Yeah, over here. So from that step, I jump on to this point where I am just going to run the neural network and tell what is happening. See, please mute yourself. Okay, so this is the model. Okay, you can run this to print the model. If I run this, it will print the model. This is the model that I have. I have input layer like 784, then dense. First 784 goes to 256, then first hidden layer has 784 as input and 256 as output. Then activation, then dropout, this is same. Then second hidden layer has 256 input and 256 output. Activation and dropout is same. Then third layer, dense layer, that is the output. It has 256 input and 10 output, right? Now, before we train our neural network, I need to specify three more things. First is, what is the loss function? Loss function is the function which computes the error between your target output and your actual output. Okay, so this error is computed by a loss function. Loss function can be different type of loss function, depends upon what kind of problem you are dealing with. So over here since we are doing a categorical classification, we have taken categorical cross entropy. Optimizer is the function or the algorithm with which we train our weight values, we modify our weight values. Okay, so over here we have taken, instead of stochastic gradient descent, we have taken Adam optimizer. And metric is accuracy. We test how good is our result, that is our metric. So we specify these three things. Right, so we specified these three parameters. Now we will train, and let me train it for, so what I'm train it with the fit function, and what values I'm giving to what arguments I'm passing to fit function. X train, Y train means all the 60,000 samples along with one hot encoded labels. Number of epochs, I'm going to perform 20 epochs. Batch size equal to batch size. Batch size we had decided 128, 128 samples per batch. Let me do it for a smaller number of batches. Instead of 20, let me do it for 10 to make it faster. We are already at the end of session. Yeah, so it is performing. You see, initial accuracy is 86%. Then it increased to, in second epoch, it increased to 94%. Third epoch increased to 95%. And you see, in every epoch, remember we had discussed now, there will be 469 batches. So you see, this is the 469 number that it is showing us. If we are taking 128 samples per batch, we need to have 469 batches. And when 469 batches complete, then one epoch is complete. Okay, and how many epochs we are running? We are running it for 10 epochs. At the end of 10 epochs, we get the accuracy to be 97%. Now we test this accuracy with the, and this accuracy is validation accuracy, the accuracy at the time of training. But this accuracy will be different when we test it with the test data. So when I do it with test data, I get an accuracy of even better accuracy of 98.1%, right? So this is how I created a very simple multi-layer perceptron in Keras, and I tried to work on the problem of handwritten digit recognition. What I did, I explained in front of you. Now is the time for question. If there are some questions that I have not read and you have already written, please be kind to write it again because I will need it. And one more thing, I think I had pasted the link for attendance. If you are still here with me, please go to this link and fill the attendance, because after this I'll close the attendance sheet and I will not share this attendance in the third session. This attendance is for whole day. Okay. And there is no automatic attendance system. This is the one which you will have to fill. I find that there are only 66 responses and I have 107 participants over here at present. So I sincerely request you to fill this attendance. Okay. Any question? My audio is not clear.
No, it is clear.
Anything about
It is clear, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, I think I
Hello.
can't do anything about this audio because, yeah, ma'am, please go ahead.
Sir, can you just give a quick summarization of each and every important point like EPOS and dropout? Quick summary
I,
of
I will
these things if you
I will
can.
do it detailed in the next class at 3 o'clock. I skipped
Okay,
that
sir.
because I don't want to discuss that at this point of time. I will discuss in the next class at 3 o'clock.
Sir,
Okay, sir.
whenever through back propagation we means adjust the weight or update the weight.
Yeah. No, I didn't get the question. Uh, could you come again? What is the question? Hello?
Hello,
Yeah, please.
sir. To get the accuracy of the result,
Mm-hmm.
how many number of hidden layers we can use?
See, ma'am, this is again a decision that you will have to make. I will see. It depends upon you start with certain number. Let's say start with 2 layers. Okay. So normally deep learning is not two-layer hidden network. When we used to do shallow neural network, then we used to have 2 layer of hidden layers. But when we say deep learning, the basic meaning of deep learning is that we have a very deep network in which we have hundreds and thousands of layers. But training hundreds and thousands of layers is too much of a task, and normally our problems don't require this much of capacity. If we have a large network, means we have too many layers, then we say that capacity of the network is too big. If capacity of network is too big, there is a possibility, there is a chance that we face this problem of overfitting, in which your network remembers each and everything. Okay. So if
Yes, sir.
network remembers each and everything, that becomes overfitting. So capacity has to be optimized. You don't take very small network, but don't take too big a network. So normally what we do, we start with 2 layers, and then from there on, we keep on increasing to check if accuracy is improving or
Okay, sir. Thank you.
not. Okay. So I think I have answered questions, and there are so many questions previously also when I was, these were popping up. Okay, from Devendra asking, can we find the intensity value of any pixel? Oh, of course, intensity value of every pixel is known to us. You just have to see what is an image. Image is nothing but an array, okay, multi-dimensional array. You access that index and the value will be given to you. Intensity means intensity in our case. The what I am accessing is the, if it is a grayscale image, the grayscale value between 0 to 255, that is the numeric value. If it is a colored image, that I will discuss in the CNN, it's RGB, 3 values are there. So with not only 2 dimensional, it's a 3 dimensional in which there is a width, there is a height, and there is a depth of 3. So first is red, then green, then blue, RGB. So it's a 3 dimensional matrix, simply matrix. So if you access that pixel, you will be able to access the value. Okay, so I will close it over here. We are already past to our time. We will meet again at 3 o'clock when I will continue from here, and I'll discuss the more concepts related to. Okay, Dr. Pranti is asking, when we are doing weight update through back propagation, do we change the bias also? That's a very good question, ma'am. See, bias, when I took this, I did not take bias as an input value. Okay. Input value was 1, as Dr. Tiwari had also told us. Input value was 1, while bias is the weight value associated with that edge. Okay, so if bias is treated as a weight value, that is definitely changing and they are definitely updating. Got it? Okay, so I will end here and let's meet in the next class. Please do fill this attendance sheet. I still find only 78 people, 78 responses, and then I will face so many angry people over WhatsApp. Okay, I don't want. Please mention again the relation between parameter, batch size, and epoch. I will do that in the next class, sir. In the next class I'll again do that. So please fill the attendance sheet because in a few minutes I will close the attendance sheet. Okay, thank you.
Already filled the attendance, no need to again submit, right, sir?
No. Once done, that's done.
Okay. Can we leave, sir?
Sure. I'm just using.
Thank
Sir,
you.
where can we fill, sir?
I just shared the link, no?
I did not get, sir.
Wait, it's my screen is hung up. If you access the chat box, probably you will be able to find it somewhere.
Sir, in chat box, I'm not finding, sir.
Probably you might have missed, probably disconnected and then connected. My screen is hung up. If somebody has this link, could you please share it in the chat box?
Yes, sir. Last 20 minutes before it happened like that for me.
Yeah, that is why you might have missed that. I'm again sharing. Wait a second.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.